and welcome again today to our sixth conversation in our series Adveniat Regnum Tuum, Thy Kingdom Come. We've spoken to quite an interesting group of people to this point. Educators, artists, building supervisors, law enforcement officers. Today, in our interview, let's talk to a husband and wife combination. Very, very important work that both of them are doing, even though it may be difficult, as one will mention, to see exactly how that plays out in the work that he does. Let's talk with Jeff Yandel and Molly Moran Yandel. Jeff is an investment banker. Molly is a medical doctor. What an interesting combination when we're talking about the kingdom of heaven here and now in each one of our lives. Molly said in one point that the gift of living through the lives of others is a direct reflection of the life of Jesus, and she sees her work as going in exactly that direction. In fact, at the present time, she works with Portland Street Medicine, going out to people homeless on the streets, and what do they need? All brothers and sisters together. We are all human beings together. Now, you think of that in medicine, you can say, yes, I can see how that would work. Banking? How might that work? Listen to what Jeff has to say. He even says himself that it may not be immediately apparent how, in fact, the notion of the kingdom of heaven plays out in the very work that he does. Once again, we must be responsible for everyone. We must be compassionate and care for everyone. He deals with a very personal and intimate level with all of the various clients that he has. And in his private life, outside of his banking work, he is completely devoted to all kinds of really marvelous charities. Perhaps his favorite is Cycle Oregon, and he has, in fact, a young lady who is this year, he is being her patron. We'll hear more about that as we go along. So pay attention to how these two people, in the things that drive them forward and have made their lives immensely interesting and valuable, may seem very disparate, but in fact, both of them are looking out for the common good. We're back to the common good. Keep an eye on this. I'll be very curious what you think. Once again, as I mentioned last time, some of the sound and whatnot from hauling my gear around gets a little bit rough, but I believe you'll be able to make this out just fine. Jeff Yandel, Molly Moran Yandel.
Thank you very much for agreeing to be with us today.
We get to shake hands after the pandemic.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
We're a mask. Well, to begin with, tell me a little bit about yourselves. A little background, where you came from, how you end up in the position that you're in life, and just a little bit of background information. Who wants to go first?
She'll go first.
You're first.
I was born into a very privileged situation. I had a nice family. I was the second of 8 kids in an Irish Catholic family, and went to Catholic grade school, high school, university, and where I met him on his failed mission to become a priest.
Oh,
and
talk about that.
yeah, well, that's his problem, not mine. He and God should figure that out.
Yeah.
But and then we were married not too long after graduating from Notre Dame, and had a couple of kids, and then I needed to get out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to medical school.
Well, that's really getting out of the house.
I needed to get
That's serious out of the house.
it's
Way out of the house.
It is way out of the house. And we did, that was a joint project, and I went into family medicine, and we're raising our family and doing everything at the same time, and I had a nice career in family medicine, delivered a lot of babies, and took care of a lot of wonderful families. And the kids grew up. Lucy, our daughter, got married, and Kevin became a chef, and Lucy's a teacher at a Catholic grade school. And then she has provided us with a lot of grandkids.
An abundance of grandchildren.
4 of them. And if you have the ability to look around the room, this house has become a preschool looking place. And I retired right before I turned
2019.
Oh, really?
18. What, I don't remember. When you're retired, you can't remember what day it is. But I know what day it is. I know what day it is when it's time to take care of the kids. And so, no, I've had a very fortunate, really fortunate, blessed life.
Well, and we'll talk a little bit more about that and what you're up to right now in medicine. I think that might be fascinating for our viewers. So, Jeff, tell us about you.
Well, I was along for most of that,
Okay.
so
That works.
you don't have to repeat most of that. I born and raised in Beaverton, right here,
Okay.
about 3 or 4 blocks from here.
And his mother still lives there.
Still lives
Oh,
there,
really?
within
So really
striking
close.
distance.
Oh, my
Oh,
God.
yeah.
Oh, that's dangerous. Okay.
So same thing, we both came from good families with both moms and dads, no divorces, lots of kids, available to good education. And so we got, each of us, really good springboards for our lives. And merged our 2 lives together in '83. And you said for most of the journey between the 2 of us. I went into financial services. I've worked for either banks or a trust company for 37 years, 38 years. And we've been very fortunate in the fact that we've had good careers, we've had healthy kids, we've had lots of opportunities.
Well, and you're both very dedicated professionals. So let's talk a little bit about that. For instance, the premise, as we were talking earlier, of all of this interview is, what does the kingdom of heaven look like right here and now, within our everyday lives? What does it look like? Can you see, for instance, in your life, can you see, for instance, in your life, how, in fact, this notion of the kingdom of heaven, as Jesus saw it being right here and now, demonstrates itself in the work that you have done, and even are doing?
Well, it's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, you meet somebody where they're at. I had the privilege, and continue to have the privilege in different iterations, to be with people at their most vulnerable, at the biggest life-changing experiences, and be trusted to be a part of that and guide them. It was just a big gift to me to be able to do that. And when you're able to walk with somebody through the joys and the sorrows of their lives, it's an honor. And I don't know, that's all. I don't think Jesus could be more clear about, the Beatitudes are sort of wrap it up. I mean, so I had every opportunity in my career to address almost everybody that Jesus described in that situation, walk down the road with somebody and see what they needed and try to provide what I could to help, any guidance and any, treatment.
Well, and you talk now about grandchildren and being retired and all the rest. Are you still using your medical background?
I am trying to. The pandemic presented a big challenge because my daughter, who is prolific at grandchildren, was pregnant with a high-risk pregnancy, so I could not do some things during the pandemic because I couldn't be exposed and carry that to her. I've been volunteering with an organization that goes to provide medical care to people on the streets who are houseless, and that has been very rewarding. It's an interesting. I'm very interested in how to address that, as we have a common interest that way, and just it's a boots on the ground kind of an experience of just interacting with people and seeing exactly what it's like for them to be living under those circumstances. And to be able to provide some medical care, some of it's just, supplies, some of it is referrals, some of it is you need to get to the hospital kind of situation. But yeah, it's also just presence,
That's just fascinating. Wow. What's this organization? Tell me about the organization itself.
Well, it's called Portland Street Medicine, and I'm not a spokesperson for
No,
them by any
not at
stretch.
all.
I am simply one of the volunteers, and it's been going on for several years now, and they could probably represent themselves far better than I can. But the goal is just to get healthcare providers and social workers, which really are the heroes in the whole thing, in this particular ministry. And they really don't even call it a ministry because it is not an ecumenical or a church-based, but it's not, so we're just there to meet people where they are. We don't know what anybody's faith orientation is. So, and they have teams of a provider, an RN, a social worker that go out in vans and go to certain areas where we know that there are people that could benefit and get referrals and that sort of thing, and go out and meet people and just meet them where they are.
That's great. Well, I think if you look at something like medicine and going out and dealing with homeless or whatever, you can see kind of a natural outflow of the notion of the kingdom of heaven. How about yourself as a professional business person, especially as an investment banker? How do you see working within your profession for the welfare of a larger number?
I think it's a whole lot easier when you talk about people's health and the emotional issues that people go through and going through the life cycle of patients, to see the care and the hands-on touch. It's a little tougher in financial services.
It could be. Well, only maybe because you don't tend to immediately identify it as that, but that doesn't mean it doesn't occur.
But I will say that I have been doing this long enough now that I too have walked with clients through the various phases of life to points where they're not able to care and make decisions for themselves, where we have to get a trust person involved, where clients pass away, and that's when they really need us for a grieving spouse to be able to step in and help out and sort of bridge until they can get through the mourning process and actually get control of their lives. So it's a little bit more of a nuanced thing because it's money and it's helping people with those details. But I do think if you're doing it correctly, you're doing it from a point of compassion and a point of real care for people that you're dealing with. And you get kind of intertwined in people's lives.
Yeah.
The next generation that comes along, and I've had the privilege of dealing with up to 4 generations in a single family. And it's rewarding work, and it's just different. But I think at its core is a similar sort of commitment to care and wanting to be a resource, a trusted, dependable person in people's lives.
I would just say that part of your position in the financial world has put you in a unique spot to become involved with many social service organizations, not as a director kind of level, but as a board member, I don't know what the head of the board is called, but
The board chair.
board chair, okay. And multiple really important social service agencies, Catholic Charities, Candlelighters, Habitat for Humanity, Non-Angel, keep going.
Keep going.
McDonald Center, well, it's not McDonald Center anymore. It's,
Maydell Center.
but you were part of really expanding that particular program to into a new building and new services. And all of those, you've wound up being a person who is
That is
the
true.
board chair.
I just didn't want to, ruins Michael's thunder in terms of how he moves through his thing.
Well,
I didn't want to
okay.
jump
I'm
ahead.
just telling
Don't
you,
worry
but that
about that.
position,
Never worry about that.
being in that position
Yeah.
has allowed you to do some amazing work.
Yeah, and that's a completely different aspect of professional life.
Sure.
Similar to the street medicine and
All
similar
the
to
Guatemala stuff. that we did.
Guatemala trips that
Yeah.
you took. So it's that's a different track of the conversation. Certainly doing nonprofit work and volunteer work versus
None of it.
my day-to-day business life.
A
But-
lot of it.
But they're intertwined. They're intertwined because you have that expertise, you have that knowledge.
Sure.
We sometimes would look down at financial stuff and say, well, there's no inherent moral good involved. Yes, there is. There's all kinds of it. The world doesn't work otherwise. And as you're saying with yourself, all of these other things that you do are immensely beneficial for huge numbers of people.
He's not saying it for himself, he never will. I said it for him.
That's true. I really appreciate that because I was hoping we were going to go that direction. Because it's huge, and the work that you have done in that has just been vital. These things would not exist without you in many ways.
Well, might be a little bit of a stretch, but
Well, no. Pick one that may be your favorite or that you really like to work with and tell us about that.
so I think the one that is the most moving for me has been helping to raise money for kids with cancer.
Okay.
It's an organization called Candlelighters for Children with Cancer, and it's the worst of anything that any parent has to deal with. They wake up one day and they figure out that one of their kids has got cancer. And this organization, it's not a medical organization, it's a support organization, and they surround the family with services. And the nice thing is that they care for the other kids as well as the kid with cancer.
Very good.
Because the kid with cancer gets all the attention, and the other kids just kind of become afterthoughts, and the parents are dealing with money problems and how do you pay for all this. And it doesn't solve the problem, but it hopefully is a touch in the lives of these families that helps them in a time when they're really struggling most.
Yeah.
It's your way of walking with them in their most painful, sorrowful time.
Yeah, and I don't have direct interaction with the families. I'm more of a fundraiser guy, and I'm on the board. But in terms of impactful, in terms of an organization that's doing wonderful things for people who are at their most desperate, that's one of them. As is street medicine. People who are on the streets and just.
But you do meet the kids. You get assigned a kiddo,
So
and you meet
that's
them on the ride.
It's a specific event, a
Yeah.
fundraising event. We do. We ride on Psycho Oregon.
Yes. Yeah.
And each of us will raise money in the name of one of the children that has been identified as an honored child for the ride. And so on the fifth day of the ride, the kids will come out and we'll go for a ride together with them. And they get jerseys, and
Sure.
it's kind of cool.
That's very nice. That's great.
So I've done that 8 times, so there have been 8 different kids.
Well, okay. One of the things, of course, that Jesus is going to say over and over is, watch out for the little ones. Watch out for the children. The children are it. And when we talk parenting and grandparenting, the children are it. And you're right at the heart and soul of that. That's huge. Well, tell me, what drove the two of you to, in your passion to do the work that you've come to do? How about you?
Are you talking about professionally or philanthropic? Or family?
Don't they overlap?
But they are. there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah, talk about the first two, philanthropy and also the financial. How did those work together? What drove you to want to do it?
So necessity was one of them.
A lot of that.
I came out of college with a B average and a psychology degree, and needed a career, and then got into the financial services business. And I like people. I'm pretty good with people, and so the combination of that and experience over time, it's really worked out because it puts you in intimate relationships with clients who need your assistance, and I like being a problem solver, and so all that sort of fits together. And I think part of the philanthropic piece for me, and this probably isn't anywhere close to where you're aiming, but I mean, I deal with really, really wealthy people most all of the time, and I figured that if I'm going to use other time, it's going to be for people who are less fortunate.
Sure.
And so almost all of my volunteer work has been for people on the margins, as opposed to the opera or symphony or
Which are worthy.
well, very worthy.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not putting those down. I'm just saying it's like I'm dealing with extremely wealthy, fortunate people, and so my philanthropic time has been spent trying to make a difference to people who are at their other end.
That's fantastic. That's really fantastic. How about you? What drove you to do this other than wanting to get out of the house?
That was a good thing. So, just a teeny bit back about the two of us as a young married couple. I mean, we came out of Notre Dame, which is heavily Catholic social justice teaching, and then you were working at St. Mary's Home for Boys. I was working for the DePaul Center, and we were living in a nice neighborhood where we could go on walks, and we're like, how are we going to raise it? If we want a family, how are we going to raise a family? And that was part of it. Like, it's not going to be on those salaries. That's just...
Sure.
And then I remember being on a walk with you when we were that young, before children, and you said, well, maybe I can do something later. I can influence things later, like at a board level or something like that, which is kind of interesting. I remember that very well. For me, the question is what motivated me?
What was the passion that drove you to want to do the work?
Why'd you go to medical school with 2 kids at home?
Well, sorry.
Honestly,
of course, I always tell people I needed to get out of the house. But the thing is that, I think any passion, the kingdom of God to me is that you, in the stillness of your heart, have a pull towards something. And you listen to that and you see and you just start following where that pull is leading. And that is what happened to me. It was not, oh, I want to be a doctor. It was, oh, I took a class when I was pregnant with our second, with Kevin. And it was a nutrition class. But I was like, well, somebody mentioned the liver. And I was like, well, how does the liver know how to do that? And so it's that energy that comes that isn't from me. I mean, I don't know where it's leading. Like, how'd that thing know how to turn that enzyme on? And then next thing I know, I'm taking an anatomy and physiology, and then I'm taking another science, and it's like this, just like feeling for the next thing, and that's how it happened, really. And we had above our windowsill for all of the time on Maple Street, we had this little fortune cookie saying that said, follow the dream that keeps coming back. And I kind of think that's how God works. Kind of gets you excited, says, what about try this? And then you start to follow. And there was a time when I was making salad in the kitchen at the Maple Street house, and I thought, well, if you didn't have 2 kids and a husband and a dog and a mortgage, and I was somewhere in this process, what would you do? And I thought, oh yeah, I could have met this. I just did.
Never had her make salad again.
Yeah, he cut off the salad situation.
That's
Yeah, he's like, I don't know what
No
we're
more
coming up
salad
with
making
next,
for you.
you know.
Okay.
Yeah,
Let's
so,
go to
yeah,
law
he
school.
started cooking, yeah, so, yeah. I don't know if that answers your
Oh,
question.
yeah, that's great. Great. Well, so both of your lives come out of a spirit of Auschwitz that is really quite marvelous. That's really, it just is. That's all there is to it. So, in this mode of kingdom of heaven, one of the other things that Jesus talks about over and over again are the poor. So, who are the poor? Who are the poor in your life? Who are the poor in your life? We all are surrounded by various sorts of poverty. What is poor in your life? In the things that you do.
I think we are poor. I think there are things that we need from God that we need to keep showing up and asking for. I think that there, you know, it's a tricky situation to be thinking of us as not poor and other people as poor. So I think that's kind of a pride thing that in my brain. But with that said, I think anybody who doesn't have a voice, anybody who isn't able to come to the table on equal footing, anybody who has not been born into a very privileged circumstance and has to fight to get whatever they need, you know, the working mom with 2 jobs and kids that she can barely afford the daycare, that people living on the streets, the lonely people that living by themselves that, you know, are widowed or, you know, elderly maybe, friends are dying. I mean, anybody with mental health issues, which everybody's got, you know, people that are isolated. That's who I see as the poor. Certainly, there's the economic, you know, stratifications.
Yeah, that's just one sort of.
But that's what I think. But I think it's really tricky to say, well, those are the poor and those are the people that I need help for sure. I want to put my energy there. But then a bigger question is, how am I poor?
Yeah.
I think that's a better question. Like, what do I need to work on? What is it that I'm not connecting with God on, or with my spouse or my kids or my friends or whatever? Where is my poverty? I think that's an important
It's a really important question because it affects the way we deal with the rest of the world. Like we don't, I'm not talking about financial poverty necessarily. It's the poorness of heart and the poorness of spirit, and that ravages souls.
Yeah.
How do you see it?
You stole my line in that,
Do it again. I'll leave that out.
the fact that I think the confusion that happens is that people see it as a financial thing. And I think it's a something missing in the heart thing. It's something, people have an emptiness, and they could be the wealthiest person in the world, but they still have an emptiness and a poorness of spirit. And there are plenty of people who are isolated, plenty of people that are poor financially, have been, you know, abused and been blocked out of the system, and all sorts of horrible things, legacies in this country from a financial standpoint. But I think poor of spirit and poor of heart transcends all that.
I think so. I think there are holes in the soul that we can all address if we look for ways.
And that's kind of what I was thinking about the fact that with clients that I deal with, there are times where there's an emptiness there. People will say, well, they're rich. Well, yeah, but that doesn't...
They're not rich, they have a lot of money, but they're not necessarily...
It doesn't mean that they're...
Scripture.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that they're not susceptible to whatever the issues are. And I think people can be attended to it at many different levels, from the low financially to the high financially.
One of the things that in these interviews I kept coming back to, talking to a wide variety of people, is the notion of the common good. It strikes me, maybe incorrectly, I don't know, it strikes me that in society today, we often overlook the notion of working for the common good, for something much more vast than we are, but something more important than just we as individuals, something that encompasses the rest of humanity in so many different ways. How do you see that? How do you see that in the things that you do and in the life that you lead on a regular basis? How do you see addressing the issue of common good?
I would like people to put their mask back on and get their vaccine, because that is doing something for somebody besides yourself. But
No,
you can edit that right out if you would like.
That's a very good issue.
But-
because we have a number of things going on right now that touch all of this, and that's certainly one of them.
It's
Taking care of the larger thing yourself.
Right.
You were talking a little bit earlier about other dilemmas. Think of the horrible heat storms that we've had lately.
Yeah.
And how many people died because nobody was watching out for them and didn't even bother to
When
check.
I was going on one of my rounds with the team that I was with, we had tons and tons of water, and we were talking to people living on the street, and they had no idea that the heat wave was coming.
Oh my goodness.
And we were handing out water and educating them about how to get to cooling centers, handing out TriMet bus passes, all this business. But that's very much boots on the ground kind of situation.
I think we've got a terrible problem with myopia in this world, in this country in particular. And you can't have a view of the common good if you're so focused on yourself. And there's a lot of narcissism in the world. There's a lot of focus on what's going to be good for me, what's going to be good for Jeff, what's going to be good for Jeff and Molly. And I think people just need to raise their eyes a little bit. And I think we need a lot of people to raise their eyes a little bit, not just...
None of us we're human, but that's the very reason that we should be interested in common good, because everybody else is here. We're all in this soup together.
Absolutely, absolutely so. And in the things that the two of you do, you see that on a large scale, how much we're all in this together. Thanks again. We really appreciate it. Thank you for inviting us into your home. We're often sweet of you to do that.
Our pleasure.
Next.
So, what do you think? What do you think about these two, as I was saying earlier, very disparate types of ways of life? What do you think? How do you think that plays out in our notion that we keep asking about the poor or the common good? Molly, in what she has done, was driven by curiosity to know more. And that then bloomed into a life of dedication to others. Jeff, emphasizing poverty of heart, poorness of spirit, as the things that keep him going and motivate him in his work. As he admits openly, of course, and brings to our attention that narcissism and greed in the present world is overwhelming. How in the world do we counteract that? And how do we in our own lives, in the kingdom of heaven right within us and playing out in our own lives, how do we do that? Are you doing that? Do you think you can? Am I doing that? Do I think I can? What is this common good? Whew. Thanks for being with us today. We'll see you next time for our 7th conversation. And until then, blessings always.